The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
So did the Aaron Rodgers thing reopen or not, or what's going on here?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast.
Kwesi had a press conference. Like 65% of it was about Aaron Rodgers, and the conclusions that you may draw, depending on where you get your information, will differ wildly. If you're the kind of person that will block out all headlines and analysis and whatever, soundbitey stuff that you will find from podcasts and blogs and stuff like this and stuff like the newspaper and all that, and you just watched it, you're going to have a totally different idea than if you read headlines. Here are some headlines that I found. On NFL.com, the headline is Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah discusses talks with Aaron Rodgers, JJ McCarthy's path to starting. Yahoo Sports, Vikings GM sends strong message on Aaron Rodgers' pursuit. CBS Sports, Aaron Rodgers' future, Vikings GM doesn't rule out more talks with QB, but happy with JJ McCarthy, quote, right now. Good old Mike Florio goes the direct route. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doesn't rule out a pursuit of Aaron Rodgers. Sports Illustrated, Vikings reopen door to steal Aaron Rodgers from Steelers. That one gets the prize from me. So if you just Googled it and you found all those headlines, you might start to get a sense that the Vikings are maybe changing their mind on this. That the report we got last week from Tom Pelissero that they were out on this was either false, or that maybe something has changed, or that it wasn't the whole story or something like that. And that Vikings Aaron Rodgers is still the big story of the offseason. And man, that's not what dude said. What is in the headlines becomes what is the truth. That's just a thing of media, just a truism of media. And when it doesn't match what I think the real truth actually is, I get really frustrated, and I know the reason for that. It's a profit deal. Everyone's fighting for clicks. Welcome to the digital age. I get it, but I guess what I want to do today is for you and me, dear listener, to try to rise above that level. I'm not even going to call it of misinformation, but of misleading information. To not get misled today. Let's not be gullible today, and instead, let's listen to the freaking quotes. I've got an editing software. I can just pull them out and show them to you. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to listen to the quotes today. So we'll start with the Aaron Rodgers thing. And what I want you to do is keep in mind that if you Googled this, you get this idea that Aaron Rodgers is still very much on the table. So he was asked, what's the deal with Aaron Rodgers? Why were you looking into him? Here is what he had to say.
I'll always say is it's our job as a personnel group to make sure we're aware of every potential option. And again, we're trying to make sure we solve for scenarios that we don't know could possibly happen. We want to make sure that there's competition in the room to make sure that if you remember last offseason when JJ and Sam were really competing, that brought the best out of both of them. And so you want an environment that's like that, a supportive environment to also just challenge each other but grow and learn and all those different things. And so we're trying to solve for a lot of different things at once. And from all those conversations comes a list of names and maybe an order and an intentional plan on how to best solve for those things. So, a player like him, he's always going to be in those conversations. But, from our delineations at that time, we're happy with where we are going forward. But, obviously the caliber of player and just, all our situations, we had to make our considerations.
So if you hadn't seen all those headlines, to me, that sounds like a past tense autopsy on why you decided to look into this idea that many find outlandish. A perfectly fair thing to have to answer for, and I think his answer made a lot of sense. Competition's important, covering the unknowns is important. What if JJ McCarthy gets hurt? What if he's in training camp and he's not as good as he was last year? What if he shows up out of shape or something like that? There's all kinds of what ifs you can't do anything about, and no matter how good you feel about JJ McCarthy, which Kwesi had a lot of praise for JJ McCarthy that may or may not, might not end up getting included in this episode, but he had it. You can go listen to it for yourself. And by the way, if you think that I was deceptive in any way about how I pulled these clips out, go ahead and listen to yourself and let me know. I tried my best not to be. I tried to just grab the like crux of the answer, the best that I understood what he was trying to say. That was what I tried to do. If you think I was being deceptive, I apologize, but I'm trying really hard not to be part of that same problem, which is why I'm giving you like 45-second clips rather than singular sound bites or tweets, right? So anyways, later in the presser, he was asked this.
How did it end with Rodgers? Was it his choice, your choice, that it wasn't going to fit?
I think we got to a place where we just said everybody was transparent, but right now we feel good about where we're going, and that's really how it ended. It's ultimately up to him. It's hard to talk about a player who's not under contract for our team and who plays for obviously isn't a member of this team. It's ultimately up to him what he decides to do with his future. But that's kind of where we left it. I know Kevin and him have a great relationship still. They'll still have a relationship. They'll keep talking but right now I'm focused on the two players that are in our room right now and in my personnel process for going forward.
Again, sounds very past tense, doesn't it? Like it's very like this thing was over. So the idea that you might get from the headlines that this isn't over really does not match up with the tone of these answers. It sounds very done. This is why we didn't do it, right? This is where it ended. We determined that we liked where our room was at and we decided to move forward with that. And taking this and twisting it because he said the words right now, to me, is either outright deceptive just for the sake of keeping a clickbaity story alive, or just a gross misunderstanding of tone. The kind of thing that a sociopath that can't understand when someone is sad or happy and like can't read faces would do. I feel like it's almost more charitable to go with the former. And this is what like bugs me, I guess. I wish that the truth was more important. To me, the truth is important, or at least my best guess at the truth, because I don't always get to know it. Sometimes I have to speculate. Sometimes the truth is subjective and we can argue about it. And I think that's beautiful. But right now in this story, it has never been more apparent how unimportant the truth is. And that is not a blanket statement on everybody, right? I think there are a lot of members of the media, Star Tribune in particular, that I think have done a very good job of being deferential to the truth, the real truth, trying their best to get the real truth. And I appreciate that deeply. And I wish everybody else was a little more like them. But so the answer to that question of how did this end, to me, if you were to like try to paraphrase that for yourself, what would you say that answer was? Well, it was that they decided they were good right now. Later, this happened.
Quincy, can you say definitively then the door is closed with Rodgers? It kind of sounds like ultimately it was his decision and we're still looking for a veteran quarterback. Can you say that door is...
I don't know that it was ultimately, I don't know that I said it was ultimately his decision. I don't want to make sure that, I think that I said that given where we are scenario-wise, we didn't think it was the right move at this time. It is also his decision to whether he signs with another team, not. That's ultimately up to another player. For me to sit here and say that, anything's 100% forever, that's just not the job, right? We're responding to scenarios and different information as it comes. So, obviously things can change, but right now we're really happy with our room and we're going to look to upgrade it in different ways. But for now, we're really excited.
That reporter there, I believe that was Dawn Mitchell of Fox 9. She's not somebody that I think very often is like going for the flamey headline thing. I think she was just genuinely asking a clarifying question and had like a stranger, because his answer was a little bit weirdly worded. So I think that was just a clarification that was needed. But that's important, right? Okay, so now we have a clear story here. And if you think Kwesi's just like lying about everything, then sure. But we have a clear story here. Aaron Rodgers approaches the Vikings. They consider it because it would be kind of malpractice for them not to consider these kinds of options. You got to think about it, right? Or you're not really doing your job. They think about it. They decide they're okay with their room. They tell him, no, thank you. They leave the door open just in case someone gets hurt or something unforeseen happens. He spent a lot of this presser talking about unforeseen, about, kind of not knowing what you don't know. But ultimately, they were the ones that told him no right now, and now it's up to him whether or not he goes and signs with the Steelers or another team, or he stays by his cell phone and waits for the Vikings to call in the event that circumstances change. But that is the crux of this to me, that yes, the idea of Aaron Rodgers on the Vikings is not 0% and it probably will never be. How can you ever say never, right? It's football. Stranger things happen all the time. But that it would require a change in circumstance. Something new needs to be added to this equation. As it stands now, it's JJ McCarthy, it's Brett Rippon, it's whoever else they add. If something changes, like a player getting injured or a weird trade offer coming in for some other quarterback or something like that, then maybe they revisit the idea. But that's where it's at right now. So if you want that clarity, that's that clarity. And you make whatever you want to make of that, but that is where we are at. Until something changes, the Aaron Rodgers Vikings thing is over. Something has to change, and I don't know what that thing really would be or how likely it is.
Opening day in Major League Baseball. That's today. The best way to get down to the park is Game Time. All baseball season long, you can snag great deals on good seats. The closer it gets to first pitch, plus Game Time shows you your view from your seat before you buy. The way you won't get stuck behind a column and miss half the game. I can't recommend Game Time enough. They show you the all-in price on each ticket. That way you know exactly what you're paying without the surprise fees. You'll even have peace of mind with Game Time because they have event cancellation protection and even job loss assurance, so I can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. The last-minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
James, let's get started with the small update, because it's not much of an update if we're being real honest with the people, but potentially something significant here with Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, Jordan Schultz saying that a trade is off the table and that the Bengals' goal is to get something done with Trey. And to your point, I think we know that. I think we knew it. And yet it is significant because he's coming out and saying, yeah, trade is off the table. Here's what I think is interesting about this. And by now, a lot of you probably already saw this report. And I'm not dismissing the report at all because I don't think the Bengals want to trade Trey. I think it's fair to say that. At the same time, why would a trade be off the table? I mean, sometimes you just got to peel it back a little bit. Why would a trade be off the table? And technically, nothing's off the table. There's no trade deadline. The fact is they didn't get close to what they were looking for in an offer. And that is what I would say we know, is that the offers that they received were not close to what they were hoping to get if they were going to consider trading Trey. And we know that they hold him in high regard from a trade value standpoint. They weren't just going to give him away. This idea that they were going to settle for the 60th pick in the draft, that was just never something that they were considering. And so they gave him permission to seek a trade. But I also believe in that meeting that they said, hey, it wasn't just his agent. They said, hey, we want a first-round pick for you. And I'm not sure they got anything close to that. And so could that change? I think that's the scenario that's interesting for me is like, all right, you read this report, a trade is off the table. Well, yeah, well, what if Washington offers the 29th overall pick? Don't think they will. But what if that happens? And so I don't want to completely dismiss a trade and say it's impossible. At the same time, I don't think that's the Bengals' goal now. I think the Bengals' goal is to try to sign Trey at some point and get him done and happy so he can be on the team this year and beyond.
Yeah, when you think about the way it was phrased, a trade is off the table. They haven't gotten the offers they wanted to up until this point, as you said. And think about the timing of it now. We talked about this on yesterday's show. If they traded Trey now, how much harder does it get to replace those snaps and replace part of that production when free agency has been so picked over in what wasn't a great free agent year in the first place? But there were some guys. There still are some guys. We talked about that on yesterday's show as well. We've been talking about it for the last week. There still are some guys out there that could help you, but not to the degree that Trey Hendrickson can help you. And so the timing of it, I do think matters. From a cap perspective, how were they going to use that $16 million in cap space if it was off the books at the beginning of free agency from a player's availability perspective? And if the offer wasn't there then, is it going to suddenly jump up And then the Bengals are going to say, sure, we'll take that first round pick and $16 million in cap space and a gaping hole in our pass rush. At this point in the offseason, I think that's where it gets even harder. And so while I agree that a trade probably isn't impossible at this point, I think what off the table means is they've seen what the offers are. The offers are not good enough, and they don't expect the offers to change. That's
Sure.
probably where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And then he went on to say that Bengals ownership is fully prepared to negotiate a deal with Trey. He referenced the Danielle Hunter contract that we talked about after he signed it with the Texans as a comparable for the Bengals and for Hendrickson in those contract negotiations in terms of cash flow and stuff like that in particular. So it still doesn't seem imminent, James. And when you look at the Bengals cap situation, it would only increase Trey's cap hit. I think I mentioned that on yesterday's show as well. Most likely it would increase Trey's cap hit. That would put them pretty tight to the cap. And then maybe you would see some creativity from this front office where they have some restructurable contracts. And Andre Perota mentioned this on the Cincinnati podcast yesterday, and then he called me afterwards because I was texting him. And so he points out that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase's salaries this year are convertible to prorated money. So while we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about how they should have prorated those bonuses, and that doesn't change, if they need cap space, it's not just cuts that they have available to them for Trey Hendrickson and a move. If Brandon Scherf decides he wants to take that 1-year deal in a month or so and they need cap space, they do have tools at their disposal with big salary numbers for T. Higgins, for Jamar Chase, even for Joe Burrow, that they have unilateral conversion rights to change to prorated money if that's something they're interested in doing, in addition to those cuts that we're still expecting to happen at some point for some of the players still on the team.
Or they could have just done what they did with, or should have done with T and Jamar with the money anyways, and had that 11+ million, right? And then you don't even have to have that discussion. But we've spent plenty of time on that. Yeah, look, I felt the entire time as I checked my phone just to make sure, and of course there's no news, but I felt the entire time that this was going to take, like you saw the shift after T and Jamar. It was like, oh, well, now the Bengals are shifting their attention to Trey. I gotta be honest, Jake. And this is an informed opinion, put it that way. I'm not reporting it, but it's an informed opinion. I don't think anything's changed. I don't think that there's like this hot and heavy negotiation going on up to this point. At some point, but I think the Bengals are preparing, maybe, but I'm just not sure that they're there. Hendrickson's camp and in the Bengals as far as negotiating. Now, this stuff I always preface it with or back it up with, this can come together pretty quickly. There are multiple deals. Danielle Hunter is one of them that give you a blueprint to get things together quickly, maybe done by Friday. But as of now, Wednesday at 12:23, as we record this Eastern time, I'm not sure that much has changed over the past 10 days or so with Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals. Or, yeah, I would say about 10 days, whenever they would have decided, hey, yeah, we're probably not trading him. We got our offers or trade offers in, and we're not going to do it. Like, what's changed? I'm not sure that the negotiations have taken flight and are hot and heavy, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe it's a change in intention from the Bengals that we've heard over the last few days. Maybe they've communicated, hey, we're going to get this done eventually. Maybe that's what has gotten into the national media. And that's where the reporting has come from. But from your perspective, as you're saying, the negotiations aren't currently close. The negotiations haven't really progressed in the last 7 to 10 days. You say 10 days, let's just call it 10 days. There hasn't been tangible progress from that perspective that we would feel comfortable saying, yeah, they're working on it, they're making progress, they're getting closer.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way at all. Now, doesn't take much. I also don't think that Mike Brown or Katie Blackburn or Duke Tobin or insert whoever in the Bengals building is just calling Jordan Schultz and saying, yeah, hey, we are hey, how does this come about? I think it's, and I'm not dismissing it, I just think it's interesting. because it's like, oh yeah, like, because Jordan's not alone. Like Ian Rappaport, like you got all this, yeah, I'm expecting this to happen, and Trey, and you see all this reporting, and then it's like nothing is moved, nothing has changed. Can happen quickly with the right offer. It could get done today, and I think that's what's interesting as well. We're clearly not done talking about Trey Hendrickson this offseason. Hopefully they can get something done with him. We'll see if you have any last thoughts.
Let's just make it not be like Jamar last year, where we're talking about it into July and August.
I think that's a huge part of this. I'm fine with May. I think now is the time to add another veteran or two that isn't Trey Hendrickson. There's time to get Trey done.
Opening day in Major League Baseball. That's today. The best way to get down to the park is Game Time. All baseball season long, you can snag great deals on good seats. The closer it gets to first pitch, plus Game Time shows you your view from your seat before you buy. The way you won't get stuck behind a column and miss half the game. I can't recommend Game Time enough. They show you the all-in price on each ticket. That way you know exactly what you're paying without the surprise fees. You'll even have peace of mind with Game Time because they have event cancellation protection and even job loss assurance. So I can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. The last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
We found out on Tuesday that the Chargers have met with one of the top edge rushers in the 2025 NFL Draft.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers.
Well, Daniel, I think Charger fans everywhere would say that they were very excited that they were able to bring back Khalil Mack. That was a very important move, but it was only a one-year deal, and he is in the twilight of his career. So you have to start planning for life after Khalil Mack. So it does make sense for the Chargers to be in a market for another edge rusher. So that's why they meet with Donovan Ezeraku, who went absolutely crazy last season. 16 and a half sacks. That is some big time major production. And he definitely wins with an element of his game that's not really in the Chargers edge rusher room right now. And we're going to talk about some of the building block players. On defense, there's several guys that are on the cusp of being guys that you can really, really rely on. And on offense, you have four guys that are already there that you can really build a football team around.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about trying to contend for a championship, you need those building blocks in place. And we're also going to talk about which building blocks they need to add to get to that point. But anytime you have news with the Chargers, you know where to go because we're the only daily Chargers podcast out there. And it came out through an interview on the Draft Network with Justin Mello that Donovan Ezeraku formerly met with the Chargers at the Combine. And we know with the Chargers in the past, the meetings don't always mean, hey, they're going to sign you. And sometimes you hear from the guys they draft, I heard nothing from them. I didn't think they liked me. And then they picked me, right? And that's how it goes sometimes. But
a lot.
In this specific case with Donovan Ezeraku, the fit makes sense. The pick makes sense at 22 based on kind of where he's at on some of these big boards. And it would make a lot of sense why they would want a guy, David, with what you talked about. Khalil Mack on a one-year contract, but Dupree in the last year of his deal. This is also a guy that has a chance to make an impact for you as a rookie and be kind of a cornerstone guy potentially for you going forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think edge rushers, as we know, are incredibly valuable. They impact the game pretty much every single time that they're able to step foot on the football field. If you have a good one, right, they get paid a lot of money because they change the way that the game is played and they affect the game at such a very, very high level. So the Chargers have to add some talent and some youth to that room. They need to find the heir apparent there. And if you look at, Donovan Ezeraku, there is some skills and some traits that get you really excited about what he has and what he brings to the table.
Absolutely. And the part that you touched on, complimenting what they have in the edge room right now, because I think between Tuli Tuipulotu and Khalil Mack, you feel pretty good about the Chargers starting edge rushers going into 2025 and a big showcase for Tuli for sure.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. What you don't have is a guy that specifically wins with speed and bend. And if you're looking at this class, this is the dude you would point to as far as one of the guys that has those specific attributes. I mean, me and you were sending clips back and forth of each other of just the ability of him to get around a tackle and be able to flatten out to the quarterback and how easily he did it. And I mean, there's no surprise when you're seeing that kind of quickness and that kind of agility that he ends up having the best shuttle at the combine at 4.19, the best 3-cone drill at the combine at 6.94, all things that are a good measurement as far as how your agility and your quickness and your get off are going to translate to the next level. He can win like that. That's not the way Khalil Mack wins. Khalil Mack's a power guy. He has skills in his arsenal. Tuli Tuipulotu has a lot of skills as well. More of an effort guy, a high motor, play with your hair on fire type of physical player as well.
Yeah.
They don't have somebody that's threatening tackles with their speed. Both Tuli and Khalil Mack can do that, but that's not what they're known for. This guy has the edge to get the corner and win in that way, and it's one of the most valuable assets that you can have at the next level.
100%. I mean, we talked about the big time production that he was able to put on tape and put on the stat sheet. 16 and a half sacks is insane.
21 tackles for loss too, which is a crazy number.
That is too. I mean, sacks are great. Tackles for loss, almost just as impactful. Putting those guys behind the 8 ball and forcing them to get out of what they want to do is definitely something that changes the game. And for me, also some really good arm length. He has 34-inch arms as an edge rusher. I mean, most tackles, you're looking at 34, 35-inch arms as something to be outstanding. So
the gold standard. Yeah.
Right. So 34-inch arms for an edge rusher is fantastic. Not only does he have good length, he knows how to use that length as well, and he uses it to great effectiveness. Obviously, he wins with tremendous bend, a skill that that really isn't in the repertoire of the room right now. Very sure tackler, only 5 missed tackles, an 8.1% missed tackle rate last season. Showcases a very quick first step that helps him win on the edge. He doesn't have the best sideline to sideline speed, but he's very accurate when he's traversing through traffic. Like
Good
he
angles.
knows he's able to identify where the ball carrier is going to be, and then he gets to that spot and he gets that ball carrier down.
Yeah, and I thought that he just football IQ wise and staying home and discipline, I thought those were all things he showed well in this, especially when you're a defense that's recovering and had just improved so much and not giving up big plays and guys being exactly where they're supposed to be. You don't want to take a step back in that
Sounds
department.
familiar.
Yeah, it's something we had to watch not that long ago. But yeah, that big wingspan definitely helps him as a tackler. And I think the nice thing is he's athletic enough to be able to chase down and corral quarterbacks when he has to, which has not been a strength of the Chargers. Once the quarterback breaks that initial pocket, do you have guys that can go chase him down? He has that in him. I wish there was a little bit more urgency on chasing down on the backside.
The effort.
It's hard to tell because it always seems like he's moving the same speed. So it's hard to tell if it's effort. That's kind of where he's at. But you see his get off, the athletic ability is there. So maybe a little bit more juice as far as that goes. And I think he did show being able to lock people out, being able to use that length to his advantage. If you're talking about the cons, reasons to be concerned, reasons that this dude isn't a top 10 pick universally, right? Which with all the good things we've said about him, you'd think maybe he should be. Size could be a concern at the next level for sure, right? 6'2 and a half, 248 pounds. 248 pounds, that's kind of the new wave of edge rushers. You're going to look at the RAS and say, hey, 35th percentile, whatever it is. There's a lot more smaller edge rushers out there, and that's part of the reason that he can win with speed, right? And I'd also say, as far as cons, some all or nothing reps where he can lose and just hit the ground because he's trying to get the edge and doesn't get there. And the only other weird thing was just kind of him disappearing off the map in 2023. He had 8.5 sacks. So you have 2 8.5 sack seasons. It's something you're not going to get often with edge rushers coming out. So, you have 2 kind of top end production seasons this year, obviously an All-American season. Right. But did only have 2 sacks in 2023. He spoke about it and said, I tried to do too much, well, whatever the case was. But those would be kind of where my concerns would start as far as, hey, what are the risks in taking someone like this at 22?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, some of the effort as far as running sideline to sideline, I think is probably not where, his skill set really shines the most. And then I think he probably could add a little bit of weight. He struggles to get off of kind of lead blocks, like one-on-one blocks from time to time, and run support. He can kind of get controlled and get moved out of the way if he doesn't win with that length initially.
Yeah, totally.
So those are a couple of things. Other than that, I like the profile. I like the skill set. I like what he's able to bring to the table, and like how what he does complements what the Chargers like to do, because one of the things we know about Jesse Minter is he loves to rotate a lot of different players. And if you have a unique skill set that he thinks that he can utilize against a particular type of tackle, then he absolutely is going to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with his skill set, you can see him getting time early, and you can see him being an impact player for you in 2025. This guy has my stamp of approval. I really liked what I saw. He's a guy where there's no real consensus right now about where he'll go. Some people have him, around a top 10 pick. Some people have him as an end of the first round pick, maybe a trade back option for the Chargers. But I really liked what I saw. But I agree with you as far as when he didn't win with the length, when guys got into him and locked onto him, he can get pushed around a little bit. And that's where you see kind of the size being a concern. I think the nice thing for the Chargers is he has some real flashes of absolute, dominance in the run game as well. It's inconsistency there that's hurt him, and obviously the size a little bit. But you have maybe, two guys with the potential to be the top run defending edge duo with Thule and Khalil Mack right now. So that part is at least, makes you feel a little bit better about that specific flaw and something it feels like he could work himself into and get a lot better at.